in interesting times. Today's stories. Media watchdog RSF says the Khashoggi murder verdict is, quote, a desire to forever silence the witnesses. Maduro says the attack on the military unit is, quote, directed and prepared by Colombia. Colombia rejects Venezuela's, quote, malicious accusations over attack. China hosts Japan, South Korea, with eyes on nuclear north. Boeing CEO Muhlenberg steps down and names David Calhoun as the new CEO. NASA and Boeing officials says a lot of things went right after a spacecraft lands in New Mexico. The glittering symbol of the press, the Newseum, is set to close its doors. Plus, we will take you on a quick tour of Arkansas's Heritage Park. This is Eagle News, coming to you from New York, bringing you stories from around the globe. And I am Jennifer Polantan. Media watchdog Reporters Without Borders Secretary General Christophe Deltour says the death sentences against 5 Saudis for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi were motivated by a, quote, desire to forever silence witnesses to or even perpetrators of this horrible murder.
On ne peut pas se réjouir d'un tel résultat alors que l'enquête a été manifestement bâclée, que les procédures, les audiences ont eu lieu à huis clos, sans qu'il soit impossible de savoir ce qui s'y disait, quels sont les éléments de preuve. La condamnation à mort de 5 des accusés, on ne peut que l'interpréter comme une volonté de faire taire à jamais des témoins ou même des acteurs de cet horrible assassinat.
5 people were sentenced to death Monday over Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi's murder, but 2 top aides to the powerful crown prince were exonerated, as authorities said the killing was not premeditated. Khashoggi, a Washington Post contributor, was murdered in October last year in Saudi Arabia's Istanbul consulate in what Riyadh called a rogue operation, tipping it into one of the worst diplomatic crises and tarnishing the reputation of de facto crown ruler Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The public prosecutor said out of individuals indicted in the case, most of whom remained unnamed, 5 were sentenced to death. 3 faced jail terms totaling 24 years, and the others were acquitted. The verdict, lambasted by Turkey's and rights group as a travesty of justice, underscores Saudi's efforts to draw a line under the crisis as it seeks to reboot its international image ahead of next year's G20 summit in Riyadh. Saudi Deputy Prosecutor Shala'an al-Shala'an told a press conference the verdict can be appealed, quote, the public prosecution's investigation showed that the killing was not premeditated at the start of this mission, but rather that it occurred in the heat of the moment. Both the CIA and a UN special envoy have directly linked Prince Mohammed to the killing, a charge the kingdom vehemently denies. According to Turkish officials, Khashoggi, a 59-year-old Saudi insider turned critic, was strangled and his body cut into pieces by a 15-man Saudi squad inside the consulate. His remains have not been found. Saudi prosecutors had said Deputy Intelligence Chief Ahmad al-Sri oversaw Khashoggi's killing, and the U.S. Treasury had claimed the royal court's media czar, Saud al-Qahtani, as, quote, part of the planning and execution of the operation that led to the murder. Sha'an said Qahtani was investigated but not indicted due to insufficient evidence, and Sri was charged but eventually acquitted on the same grounds. According to Western sources, both aides were part of Prince Mohammed's tight-knit inner circle and were formally sacked over the killing, but only a Sri appeared in the court hearings. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro calls on authorities in Colombia, Peru, and Brazil to capture those involved in the attack on a Venezuelan military barracks, which resulted in the death of a soldier.
Este ataque que se dio el día de ayer fue dirigido y preparado desde Colombia, dirigido por el criminal, el fascista, que tiene las manos bañadas en sangre, prófugo de la justicia venezolana que está en la Embajada de España aquí en Caracas, Leopoldo López, directamente por él, con base de operaciones en Colombia, Iván Duque, en Perú y en Brasil. Hoy salió el gobierno de Perú y el gobierno de Brasil a desmentir su relación con los asaltantes del cuartel venezolano. Si el gobierno de Perú de verdad de corazón no estuvo involucrado, yo pido que se capture bajo las leyes internacionales a este terrorista llamado Vilca Fernández, que por las redes sociales asumió la autoría del ataque al cuartel militar venezolano dirigido desde el Perú.
A Venezuelan soldier was killed on Sunday during an attack on military unit in the south of the country, the government said, blaming it on Brazil and Peru-backed political foes. Local media reported that the attack took place in Gran Sabana, one of the main tourist areas in the country, in the southern state of Bolivar that borders Brazil. Colombia tweets that it firmly rejects what is called unfounded and malicious accusations from Venezuela, which has claimed that Colombian President Iván Duque has sponsored an assault on a battalion in the south of the country to trigger an incident that would justify U.S. military intervention. The tweet says, quote, "The foreign ministry, on behalf of the Colombian government, strongly rejects the unfounded and malicious accusations of the illegitimate regime of Nicolas Maduro against Colombia's government." China hosted the leaders of squabbling neighbors South Korea and Japan on Tuesday, flexing its diplomatic muscle with America's two key military allies in Asia and seeking regional unity on how to deal with a belligerent North Korea. The gathering in the southwestern city of Chengdu was held with the clock ticking on a threatened gift from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un that would reignite global tensions over its nuclear program. Kim has promised the unidentified gift, which analysts and American officials believe could be a provocative missile test if the United States does not make concessions in their nuclear talks by the end of the year. At the opening ceremony with South Korea's Moon Jae-in and Japan's Shinzo Abe on Tuesday morning, Chinese Premier Li Qiang said he hoped cooperation among their nations would protect the region's safety and stability. South Korean President Moon Jae-in said it was important they work together at a turbulent time. The gathering in Chengdu will feature a first one-on-one meeting between Moon and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for 15 months. Ties between their two nations have hit rock bottom in recent months over trade issues and other disputes related to decades of bitter wrangling over Japan's 1910 to 1945 occupation of the Korean Peninsula. The United States has frequently urged its two allies to bury the hatchet, worried that their poor relations were complicating diplomacy in Asia, although it has held off direct mediation. China is appearing to fill that void with Chengdu event. At separate lead-up meetings in Beijing on Monday with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Moon and Abe both spoke of China's hefty diplomatic influence in the region. Up next, Boeing CEO Muhlenberg steps down and names David Calhoun as the new CEO. NASA and Boeing officials says a lot of things went right after a spacecraft lands in New Mexico. The glittering symbol of the press, the Newseum, is set to close its doors. Plus, we will take you on a quick tour of Arkansas's Heritage Park. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Eagle News, coming to you from New York, and I am Jennifer Polentan. Boeing on Monday replaced its embattled chief executive, Dennis Muhlenberg, saying a change was needed as it attempts to restore its reputation amid the protracted 737 MAX crisis. Boeing named Chairman David Calhoun as its chief executive, saying the company needed to restore confidence and repair relationships with regulators, customers, and all other stakeholders. The company pledged to operate with a renewed commitment to full transparency, including effective and proactive communication with the FAA, other global regulators, and its customers. The aerospace giant's financial picture remains clouded following the global grounding of the MAX in March after 2 deadly crashes.
All of us at Boeing are deeply sorry for the loss of life in the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 and Lion Air Flight 610 accidents. We feel the immense gravity of these events, and we recognize the devastation to the families and friends of the loved ones who have perished. There is nothing more important to us than the safety of the people who fly on our airplanes.
Thank you all very much.
NASA and Boeing officials, including Senior Vice President of Boeing's Space and Launch Division, James Chitton, and NASA's Administrator, Jim Bridenstine, gave a news conference after Boeing's new Starliner unmanned spacecraft returned to Earth on Sunday, landing in the New Mexico desert in the United States after a clock problem prevented a rendezvous with the International Space Station, saying that despite the mission failure, quote, a lot of things did go right.
You know, on Friday, after the separation of the vehicle from the launch vehicle, you know, we had some challenges, and I was very clear that a lot of things went right, and a lot of things did in fact go right. But we had a lot more left to do. We had to test the vehicle itself, we had to test entry, descent, and landing. And so I can tell you this morning, we're all very excited that a whole lot more things did go right. You look at the landing, it was an absolute bullseye. Better than I think anybody anticipated. And so that's good for the agency, it's good for Boeing, and it's good for the United States of America. Of course, we had the challenge with the mission elapsed time, which ultimately resulted in, you know, the spacecraft believing it was in a place where it wasn't and trying to make corrections to get where it thought it should be. But we got control of the spacecraft. We flew the spacecraft very successfully. We did not make it to the International Space Station. We did not dock. But the spacecraft flew exceptionally well. And then, of course, we brought the spacecraft home.
The spacecraft, although we got a little bit of a surprising start, the team immediately took care of that. We circularized an orbit and were able to show that this spacecraft controls attitude, does all the things she's supposed to do, keeps people safe. Our cabin temp and pressures and all that were terrific. Of course, return is another, yesterday I mentioned, return is something that you can't really test. You got to put your heat shield on and go through the heat regime. Today we just had, it couldn't really have gone any better.
We're going to have to go back. We've got a lot of data to review. We've got a lot of information that we need to collect. And you know, when you're so focused on the mission itself or the flight test itself, we're not going through and evaluating everything in real time. Now we need to go back and do a review of everything from start to finish, and we might find some things.
The Newseum, a glittering monument to the news media steps from the U.S. Capitol in Washington, will be closing its doors on December 31st, in a move that reflects the woes of the media industry, which has been struggling financially as it faces repeated attacks from political leaders.
Over 10 million visitors have come to the Newseum in this location through our time here. Half of those visitors are school children. So to see them interact with things like the Berlin Wall and learn about the Cold War, or even our 9/11 gallery, which they weren't even born for, that is something that's really rewarding for us to see. The Newseum started over 20 years ago as an idea from our founder, Al Newharth, to educate and convene conversations about the First Amendment and the craft of journalism. That small nugget of an idea started in Roslyn, Virginia, in a lovely museum there. And after about a decade in that location, we decided to move here to Washington, D.C. The Freedom Forum is the parent organization of the Newseum. Their ambitious goal for this institution was to move here over 12 years ago. They invested millions of dollars to purchase the land and build out this building. Ambitious dreams were achieved over 12 years, but they were unsustainable. To continue on and to continue doing the work of the Freedom Forum, we do need to leave this building. We're going to be selling the facility to Johns Hopkins. They will take over this building, but the work of our institution will continue on, and the work of the Newseum will continue on. The future of the Newseum is unclear at this time. It's going to take us at least 6 months to deinstall the exhibits and move them to our dedicated archive facility. After that process is complete, we're going to start looking at what the future holds for us. It could be another building institution like the Newseum as you've known it, but it could be something dramatically different. We don't know what that is. We want to be thoughtful about what the future is, and we want to be impactful.
In other news, Eagle News correspondent Don Omar Cuevas takes us on a relaxing tour of Jacksonville, Arkansas's Heritage Park, listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. Take a look.
Hello from Jacksonville, Arkansas.
One of the unique places to visit in Jacksonville, Arkansas is Reed's Bridge Battlefield Heritage Park, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The park features a replica of 1860s Homestead and War artifacts, and a walking trail with historical markers narrating the 1863 Little Rock Campaign Civil War battle and other historical events. It is also an official Trail of Tears site. At Heritage Park, visitors can learn about history while enjoying a day in the outdoors.
Coming in from Jacksonville, Arkansas, I'm Eagle News correspondent Don Omar Cuevas, and I am 1 with 25.
That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I am Jennifer Polintan, and I am 1 with 25.